Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Gaming and Leisure's podcast with me, your host, John Cash Philippi. I am currently interviewing Nick. Nick, you're going to have to pronounce your last name for me. Clessuras.
Clessuras. Yeah. Yeah.
Clessuras. Thank you
Just
very
like it's spelled, Clessuras. Yeah. Yeah.
much. Okay. Uh, and so now I'm just going to go with Nick. I think that's probably the best, if you don't mind. We're going to talk a little bit about hotel room technology. It's evolved over the years. It's gotten more and more advanced. At some points, it gets to where it's beyond a beyond even my level of expertise. So I'm going to talk a little bit with Nick about it, and we're going to investigate a little further. So, Nick, why don't you first start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and so on?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nick Clessuras here. I'm Senior Vice President of Sales for Sonifi Solutions. And within that responsibility, I effectively manage all of our sales teams, all of the business dealings with hotels and brands. And I also have a couple other groups that are one non-technical customer service and effectively and a retention team. So we call them our customer success managers. So that's the extent of my responsibility at Sonifi. From a background perspective, long history in TV distribution. I started my career. I was actually, thinking about this before this call, John, and I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 29 years. So it was like, so I'm dating myself a little bit in that regard. But I started in the wireless industry, believe it or not, back when you still had things called analog phones that were literally sending radio waves to towers. And went through that digital transition from analog to digital for the wireless business. Then I had a really unique opportunity to jump into a little company called TiVo at the very early days of when digital video recording had literally just been invented. And that was a really exciting time period, late 90s, early 2000s, where, you would demo that product in a store and somebody would be like, holy crap, what did he just do? Like just pausing live TV was, really exciting. So that was a cool gig. I went from there to DirecTV. And so I was in TV distribution for a good, 13, 14 years. And I've been at Sonifi for going on my 10th year here now, believe it or not. So
I remember spending a fortune on that box myself.
oh yeah.
It came
Oh yeah.
out.
Oh, you'd see they were $700-800 for a machine that would record, 6 hours of video. Right. It's amazing to think of, where that started and sort of, where things are today.
Yeah, it's incredible the amount of technology. It's just gone into the video distribution realm alone, let alone just our hotels and how we provide it and how much easier it's gotten to get data like that. So with technology, and I've got a list of questions, and I'll go through them. But with the technology in the room getting more and more advanced, from tablets to TVs to preference settings, and for temperatures and hotels, I mean, what do you see as the evolution in the hotel industry going forward?
Good question. Yeah, I would answer that in a few different ways. I think one of which is, yes, there has been a number of new techs that have come into the guest room. But also, there's this at the same time, if you think about consumer trends and hotel trends as it pertains to technology, I mean, for quite some time, it used to be you'd go to a hotel and you would get better tech than you had at home. And I think that paradigm has really shifted over the last, call it 10 years, where I think, hotels by and large, for whatever reason, are, have less tech typically than what guests are receiving at home. So I don't think there's a real crystal ball as it pertains to technology in general. But and I don't think there's things like future proofing for technology. So I the main way I would answer that question is that you really need to think about what the needs are for the hotel and solve for those needs with technology. So there's a lot of stuff out there that right, wrong, or indifferent, I could live without. Right, there's nice to haves, And then there's other things that, can really drive value and utility to guests that impact something that's meaningful to a hotel, whether it be guest satisfaction or driving revenue or even reducing costs. So I think we're at a crossroads, at least in my mind, in terms of there isn't this one size fits all magical solution that everybody has to have this thing. There are some baseline fundamentals that I think are critical for today, but and then there's always every vendor out there talking about the next greatest thing on a PowerPoint slide and a pitch deck that's going to solve all your problems. So I don't think there's a really good answer in terms of evolution, because technology really is, I look at it short term, right? I mean, I don't think there's any long-term technology solve that you can put in a hotel today that's going to solve, every problem that you have. And I generally think those decisions should be thought about more short-term, 3 to 5 year window. What's necessary to compete today? What's necessary to drive guest satisfaction or loyalty or cut costs or drive revenue? So that's how I think about it generally. And, I think that what may work for one hotel may not work for another hotel because of different demographics, due to location, what problems are they trying to solve. So I think in short, I don't think there's a really good answer to sort of evolution of tech in hotels per se. I think it's more about what problems are you trying to solve as a business, and does the tech meet those needs, and does it deliver the result that you're looking for?
That's great. It's actually a good segue into the next question I had, which really is because it's more kind of Sonifi related because of your expertise with them, but everywhere else. Because Sonifi reaches way beyond the casino industry, and most of the people watching this are in the casino industry. What's the differences between the technology you see that as it relates to a hotel that doesn't have a casino in it?
Good question. Yeah, we serve a lot of casinos. I mean, we're, I want to say roughly about 50% penetrated in the casino world, but we also do, we're a supplier for Marriott, for Hilton, for all the major brands. And as I think about the difference between the two segments, there's a couple things that come to mind. Like the non-casino branded hotels are really focused on standardization, right? And that's perpetuating consistency across the brand. It's kind of like why do you go to McDonald's and buy a Big Mac, right? I mean, I think we can all agree, because it's not good for you, right? But you go buy a Big Mac.
It's not.
you're just learning that.
That's where I messed up. Okay.
Yeah, but it's the consistency, right? You know what you're going to get. It's going to be the same at every McDonald's locations you get anywhere. So I think by and large, the non-casino brands are really focused on that standardization, whether it be really robust Wi-Fi standards or, a particular channel lineup that you have in the guest room that delivers, the top watched or most highly rated channels that that are that consumers are viewing today in the same order, so that that ESPN is on channel 5 at this hotel, and it's the same when you go to the another hotel that's within their brand. So that standardization really drives that consistency across the brand, and the know what you're going to get factor when you stay at one of those brands. And I think that's one thing that really differs from, in the casino business. While there is some of that in the casino hotel space, I think by and large, I sort of think about casinos as major casino brands. Then you have your independents, then you have your tribal casinos, and they all function a little differently with regards to, what they're doing. The other thing I would say you're seeing really prominent in the non-casino hotels is the use of the television screen in the guest room to really perpetuate the brand. And I mean things like, if you go stay at a Marriott, right, you see a Marriott Bonvoy video. It's the first thing you see when you turn on the TV. And I think that's really powerful messaging, because, if there's one thing that you can be certain of when a guest goes in the guest room is they're going to turn on the TV, right? And what happens when they turn on the TV is a really powerful moment, right? I mean, TV screens have gotten larger, and I think those brands are really taking advantage of that larger screen from a messaging perspective and communicating to guests not only, hey, here's our brand and what we stand for, but also using that screen in the room to drive guests to revenue centers and the things they want them to focus on. And beyond that, you're seeing things like, wellness content, right? Since the pandemic started, there's been a huge shift in terms of driving awareness and around cleanliness and those sorts of things, putting wellness content on an interactive system so a guest can, while they're in the room, do some yoga or those sorts of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, a great add-on for televisions now would be to spritz people as you walk in with cleanser.
Yeah, yeah. That's the only other thing that really stands out to mind to me would be really Wi-Fi standards. That's something that the major non-gaming brands are put significant effort behind, because we all know, at least at this stage, that really solid, robust working Wi-Fi is literally table stakes in hotels today. And so all of them have these 40, 80 page documents on standards. It has to be this AP, it has to be this density of coverage, you need to have this type of circuit coming into the building. And so they've really embraced that, and I think done a really good job with making sure that they're caring for the guests in that regard.
Well, with casinos, at least, I think the biggest problem I've seen with hotels is every GM I've ever worked for says the exact same thing. I don't want them in the room.
Yeah.
Why are we doing all this technology in the room? Why are we doing all these great things for the guest in the room when all I want them is driven to the floor where they make us money, and not sitting in the room. How does Sonify, how does any television distribution company actually embrace that?
Yeah, I think about it a little different. I would say, in my humble opinion, I think that line of thinking is a little old school, just in my personal opinion. Look, the reality is they're gonna be in the room at some point during the stay, right? I mean, they're not gonna be on the floor at a restaurant at a show 24 hours a day. So when they're in the guest room, why not consider making the most of every engagement you can have while they're on your property? And I would tell you unequivocally, by way of data, in casino hotels in particular, and this is in contrast to non-casino hotels. Casino hotels, guests still buy a crazy amount of movies in the room. And that is a revenue driver that, look, if your free to guest cost is $7 and you're making $2 on, guest buying movies on a per room per month basis, you're only paying $5, right? So there's a real value in terms of thinking, at least in from my perspective, about they're going to be in the room, and what can you do with them when they are in the room? Perpetuate your loyalty program by way of really clean videos. You can drive them to your revenue centers by having really tastefully done videos on what this particular spa treatment looks like, right? So there's a lot of stuff you can do from an interactive TV perspective that drives loyalty, that will drive them to your revenue centers when they are in the guest room. And then I think the other side of that coin is they're used to these things elsewhere, right? So when they stay at I'm not trying to plug brands here, but let's say they're staying at most of the non-casino branded hotels have embraced, things like bring your own content, and they've delivered it in some way, shape, or form. So, when I can stream my Netflix show at this hotel I stayed in last week, and then I go to this hotel and I can't do it, that's a dissatisfying moment, because it's not the same experience. And, I get, we want them on the floor, but that's why they're there, right? They're there to go to the floor. They're there to go to a restaurant. They're there to go to a show. And so I think there's ways to enhance those things and increase value to the guests while they're in the guest room.
Well, I guess that if I had to talk on the other side of it myself, it would be I've done a lot of different tech in hotels. I mean, you put from RFID to, the mini bars, everything else, the temperatures adjustments. What about things like tablets? I mean, tablets were there. They were there for a minute,
Yeah.
and everybody was putting a new tablet in, and then they just went away, at least for the most part. Or can you explain that evolution a little bit?
I could give you my opinion, and it's a good question because I think it has to do more with ongoing maintenance than anything. If you think about it as a general rule of thumb, I like to say, and this is kind of what I tell all my folks, and I tell customers this: the more you have in the room equals the more things that can break. Right? Guests do things right while they're in the guest room. They move TVs, they jiggle things, they play with things, they drop things. So I think with tablets, I think I actually think they're much better transactional devices for things like guest request or in-room dining or booking a spa appointment or a valet. But on the flip side of that coin is the maintenance, right? They need to be serviced. They get stolen. They're expensive. They need to be cleaned, and it doesn't take very long before how many times have you changed an iPad or a phone where a year later it's slower than it was the day that you bought it. They become sluggish, they need to be replaced, and they're expensive. So I from my personal opinion, I think that's really the sort of gestalt around why you haven't seen tablet technology really broadly take off across the industry.
Cool. So that being said, what do you consider as table stakes technology for a hotel? What are the must haves and why?
I would say first and foremost in today's world is really solid, robust Wi-Fi with a free tier. And I also think a pay tier has a real value to hoteliers today because guests will pay for better bandwidth. I mean, you can't cheat them on the low end. You can't say, okay, here's your dial-up speed for free, and if you want 5 megs a second, pay me $20. But you can offset the cost of those networks by appropriately structuring a reasonably solid free tier along with an upgraded tier that gives them a better experience. So Wi-Fi, number one. I would say number two, believe it or not, as much streaming content is going on out there, there's still guests are watching more TV than they ever have been. Of course, the last couple of years, you really saw TV usage go up because the folks that were staying in hotels were spending more time in the guest room and not on the floor. So a really big spike in terms of just watching linear content. So I think a reasonably solid basic 40 channel lineup is with the top rated channels is really still important today. If you try to take ESPN out of a hotel, you will get complaints.
Well, Netflix and chill became something I recently learned about. Whoa, hey,
yeah.
and
So,
watching series and things.
and we actually did quite a bit of ideation and testing around during the pandemic. We were saying everybody was looking to cut costs at that time, and so we said, okay, well, what would happen if we put up just your locals, right? Your ABC, NBC, Fox, and then you added a streaming solution alongside that. So yes, you could bring your own content, but you still had access to local news, weather, sports, those sorts of things. And it, what we found was it works really well for a product that is really geared towards, say, a millennial audience or a younger generational audience, but did not fare so well when you had a product that catered to a wider variety of demographics. So there's those sorts of things, but the fact of the matter is people still watch TV when they're in a guest room, even if they just put it on as white noise in the background. They will turn it on. And I think the other big thing about sort of when I think about free to guest is the second it doesn't work, that's when you get 300 calls at the front desk, right? So I'd say Wi-Fi, good free to guest lineup, and then without a doubt the third one would be streaming in some way, shape, or form, right? Guests they're watching Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, Hulu, you name it. They're doing it on their mobile devices, but it's a really cool experience when they don't want to watch their favorite movie or sitcom on a 4-inch screen or a 5-inch screen. They want to watch it on that 50-inch that you have in the guest room. And so giving them the ability to get that content there, I think, is really important. And this is one thing that I would contrast between, say, casino hotels and non-casino hotels, is the non-casino hotel world has really embraced this type of functionality, whereas I would definitively say that casino hotels have lagged, relatively speaking. But they want to watch their own content. And when you think about the data that we see, we launched Staycast maybe late 2016, 2017. We've seen over almost 2,500 unique apps cast. And what's really been interesting to me watching the evolution of that product is just the amount of content that people are consuming and where they're getting it from, right? It's not just about Netflix, right? When we launched it, it was, if you looked at a pie chart and said, hey, what are people casting in hotels 5-6 years ago? I would have said, 75% of that's Netflix. And I would tell you today, it's probably more like 35% Netflix. And there's this huge piece of the pie that is international content, right? Which I think is, a cost savings opportunity for hotels. It's particularly casinos that pay for an international channel to go to 3,000 rooms, and they're literally serving, 1 to 2, a small number of guests with it. So people casting content from their home servers, products like NFL Sunday Ticket, or ESPN Live, or a premium channel subscription they have. So it really is not it's not just about putting Netflix in the hotel. They want their content. And while there are some commonalities, there's some main players: Netflix, Amazon, Disney, HBO Max. The pie is really big when it's actually kind of exciting, because you sort of see that there really isn't a one size fits all approach. And I would say that's why we lean into casting more so than we would lean into, say, an embedded app that we put on a set-top box or on a television.
Well, and that comes with a set of challenges as well. I remember when we've done it, you have to trigger a clear out of the credentials for the guest, and when they leave the hotel room, and if that doesn't happen, somebody else uses it. I mean, it's an on and on going challenge, and like you said, it doesn't have the variety that a lot of the patrons are looking for. I'm shocked that you say 2,500. Unique apps. I couldn't even think. I can't think of more than 10 off the top of my head. So that's amazing. How about because you mentioned a little bit, or you kind of hit without saying the word older guest, but the
large. Talking about me, John?
You and me both, buddy. But when you're talking about older guests, I mean, how much of the technology is being embraced by a lot of our older guests, and especially in casinos? Because in the casino industry, I mean, the majority of our traffic is the over 50 age range. So, I mean, is it being embraced as much as it is in other places?
I would say yes, but not, definitively your higher aged, if you will, demographic is going to use these things a little less than, say, someone of a younger demographic, right? But that's all shifting now. That being said, adoption, use of technology, meaning Wi-Fi and streaming, is certainly progressing with older demographics. I mean, you can look at, I was, before I got on this call, I was looking at some Netflix data, and I didn't know this until, about an hour ago, but almost half of Netflix subscribers today are in the age group of 45 to 65. So literally half of their customer base is in that demographic. So, as you translate that down to the tech that they will use, certainly, we do business in the senior living facilities across the United States as well. And you're seeing the progression there. They all come to those with laptops. They all have their Netflix subscriptions. They will use products like FaceTime to connect to their loved ones and so on and so forth. So I would say, not certainly as much as compared to younger demographics, but certainly progressing.
Great. Well, we're coming to the end of it, and but I just like to ask if you had like one sentence to really kind of sum up what Sonify is doing to embrace technology in the hotel rooms. What would it be?
Sure. So maybe I would say one sentence with four broken up into four parts. John, I would say I appreciate that question. And look, our thing is, our philosophy, over the last few years has really changed in terms of how we look at the market. Because there is this no one size fits all thing for every hotel. Everybody wants to differentiate. So, what I work on with my team is really understanding the needs, problems, and goals. What are we trying to solve for? But also backing that with real data, because you do have this disparity of knowledge across the industry, and that's born from a sales pitch from vendor A, a sales pitch from vendor B, what the customer may know about their own property. And so I really try to focus on data driven decisions in terms of what tech is right for a particular hotel. And we've got 40 years of data and 40 years of doing this stuff where we've trialed and errored a lot of products. So, I really try to use that information when I'm discussing these things with a hotel to say, hey, look, we did this 10 years ago. Here's where we put it. Here were the results. If that works for you, then let's proceed. If not, then I've at least said, hey, here's a lesson we learned, and share those learnings with our customers. So, I would say lastly, it's important to select the right vendor when you're thinking about technology. And it's, anyone is capable of dazzling you with a pitch deck and some great new feature that's going to solve all your problems, but it's really the data behind it and the ability to scale that I think that propels us and has kept us in this business for so long. So was that one sentence?
That was a really long sentence, but you didn't take a breath, so I'm going to count it as one. Well, Nick, it has been a pleasure talking with you, everyone. This is Nick Clessuras from Sonifi. I am John Filippe, your host of Gaming and Leisure's podcast, and we were talking about hotel room technology, and I hope you all learned something today. I know I did.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate having me on today.
Thank you.